His Spitfire just took a 20mm shell through the wing. Bob Hoover is going down over the Mediterranean, controls gone, smoke pouring from the engine. February 9th, 1944. He's about to spend 14 months as a prisoner of war. But when he escapes, he's going to do something almost no one has ever done. Steal an enemy Focke-Wulf 190 and fly it home. That's just one of 8 documented stories you're about to hear. Not legends. Not folklore. Verified military records. An American medic named Desmond Doss lowers 75 wounded men down a cliff on Okinawa, one at a time, under enemy fire, and never touches a weapon. A one-eyed Canadian named Leo Major walks into a Dutch city at night and causes so much chaos, the entire German garrison abandons Zwolle by morning. A Soviet woman named Lydia Litviak shoots down a Luftwaffe ace with 11 victories, looks him in the eye after he's captured, then goes back up and disappears forever. She was 21 years old. A British sergeant named Stanley Hollis charges 2 German pillboxes on D-Day, captures them both single-handedly, then goes back into fire to rescue his men, the only man awarded the Victoria Cross that day. These people weren't superheroes. They were mechanics and cooks and farm boys. They were terrified, watching friends die, facing odds that should have killed them. So here's my question. What would you do when every option is impossible and the only choice left is to keep moving forward is less than Hashone? 5 hashes greater than... Our first hero is in a German prison camp right now. It's April 1945. Soviet guns are thundering in the distance. The guards are abandoning their posts. And Bob Hoover just found a wooden plank under the barracks. It's midday on February 9th, 1944. 4 Supermarine Spitfires from the 4th Squadron of the 52nd Fighter Group circle the harbour at Nice like eagles stalking prey. Bob Hoover sits in the cockpit of one of those fighters. He's an American pilot flying British machinery over occupied France, and he's about to have the worst day of his life. He dives, lines up his target, an enemy vessel in the harbour below, releases the ordnance. The bombs whistle as they fall. They strike the water. Explosions erupt around the ship. Missed. Hoover pulls up hard, but there's no time to think about the failed drop. His aircraft is down on power. Something's wrong with the engine. Then he looks up. High above the clouds, a squadron of Focke-Wulf 190s spots the Allied aircraft below. They see an opportunity. 4 German fighters roll over and dive. Hoover is trying to nurse his crippled Spitfire when he sees them, 4 enemies barreling down straight at him. He radios the other Spitfires immediately. I need help. Then he does the only thing he can. He steers his damaged plane toward the enemy and fires. The Germans pull away from the head-on attack. They speed past each other at closing speeds over 600 miles per hour. The German pilots turn around. They're getting on the Americans' tail. But Hoover won't let it happen easily. He dives, twists, turns, evading gunfire, surviving. His fellow Spitfires race to the rescue. They arrive and the chase turns into chaos. The problem is brutal and simple. The Spitfires are flying an older specification of the iconic aircraft, now outclassed by the 190s in almost every respect. Their attacks are avoided with ease. It doesn't take long before a 190 sets his sights on Hoover again. Hoover is making a turn when it happens. A single 20mm shell strikes him at the root of the wing. In a blur, the wing shears off. His Spitfire twists into an uncontrollable tumble. Hoover hangs on, pulls himself out of the doomed machine. The parachute opens above the waters of the Mediterranean, with a battle still raging above him. The parachute drifts down. Hoover knows capture is inevitable. A German freighter fishes him out of the water. Since then, he spent his time bouncing from one detention facility to another, interrogated, tortured, threatened with execution. He never responds with anything but his name, rank, and service number. 14 months pass. April 20th, 1945. Hoover wakes up to another long day at Stalag Luft 1, a prison camp for captured pilots outside Bath in Germany. Throughout the morning, the prisoners can hear explosions in the distance. Soviet artillery shelling targets several miles away as they push the Germans back bit by bit. The front line is encroaching on the camp. Most of the German guards have been sent elsewhere, leaving the camp with little more than a skeleton crew. Hoover doesn't fancy falling under Soviet care. With escape enticingly close, he decides it's time for a breakout. He joins forces with another pilot, Jerome Ennis, from the same squadron. There's also a Canadian known only as George. With cooperation from other prisoners, they hatch a simple plan. Days ago, they found a wooden plank under one of the camp's buildings. Hoover had an idea about how to use it. They just need a distraction. Late in the evening, a few of Hoover's friends pretend to get angry at one another, shouting obscenities, escalating to violence. "Hit me before I lose my nerve," one says. "Like in the face? Surprise me." Men quickly gather around the fight. The shouting is heard across the camp. The few remaining guards don't intervene, but they keep an eye on the commotion to make sure it doesn't blow over. Meanwhile, out of sight, Hoover, Ennis, and George make a run for the fence with the wooden plank in hand. They move swiftly. Place the plank over the barbed wire. Its weight squashes it down. One by one, they carefully walk over it like a bridge. Then they jump down the other side to freedom. They disappear into the forest, unseen. The escape goes shockingly smooth considering how few guards are left. By the time they reach a nearby town, it's just two of them. George decided to go his own way. Hoover would never know what became of him. Night is falling. They find a farmhouse and break in, somewhere to stay the night. The next morning, they're jolted awake by the doors opening. They've been caught. But to their great relief, a woman calmly asks in French, "Who are you?" She appears to be French, relocated to Eastern Germany for labor. When Hoover explains he's planning to make a journey to American lines, she gives them a small handgun with a couple of magazines. Moved by this gesture, Hoover writes a note thanking her and asking any Allied soldier not to harm her. She's very grateful, understanding its implications. Not long after the pair say their goodbyes, Hoover and Ennis steal some bicycles and make their way west for several miles. Then they stumble across something odd. A German airfield. Oddly quiet. Aircraft lined up. Hoover sees a chance for a ticket home. He insists they break in to investigate. Ennis is less keen, but he accepts. The pair jump the fence. The field is deathly quiet, apparently abandoned. Hoover approaches the line of Messerschmitt 109s, but he's disappointed to realize the ones before him have been heavily damaged. The base, it seems, is a repair shop. They wade through the line, inspecting each machine. Some are better than others. A few even seem airworthy. But sadly, they're all lacking fuel. Leaving the 109s behind, Hoover spots a Focke-Wulf 190 and approaches it. It looks intact from the outside. Hoover jumps up to peek into the cockpit. Then someone shouts, "Halt!" Instantly, Ennis draws the pistol and aims it square at the German mechanic's chest. "Freeze," he orders. The unarmed German has no option but to comply. With the mechanic held at gunpoint, they prepare the machine for takeoff. The weapons appear to be inoperable, but fortunately, it has a full tank of fuel. Confident he can fly the machine, Hoover waves for Ennis to climb aboard. But his friend waves back a negative. "I never want to fly again," he shouts. "You go." Hoover is hesitant, but he goes for it. He salutes his good friend one final time before closing the canopy and slamming the throttle to full. The 190 picks up speed quickly. Hoover doesn't bother taxiing at all. He sends it straight through the grass. The machine rises into the air. Gaining altitude, Hoover is now faced with the issue of navigation. He has no idea where he is. But with altitude, he spots the northern coast of Germany and uses the position of the sun to figure out cardinal directions. With those two things to work with, he decides to make his way west, hoping to see the iconic windmills of the Netherlands. The entire time he flies, with his heart racing, the reality of what he's doing is beginning to hit. He's flying a German plane with German markings straight over a very active front line, hoping to land on Allied-held territory. It's nothing short of a death wish. He tries flying just below the clouds to avoid detection, but he knows it's on a wing and a prayer. He flies and flies over the Jutland Peninsula, following the coast, completely blind as to what exactly lies below him. Then a windmill appears on the horizon. Somehow, he's past the front undisturbed. He spots a couple of airfields, but fears he could be attacked or land on a mined runway. Instead, he aims for a grass field. He slows as much as possible, skimming the ground until the aircraft stalls and the belly slams onto the earth. Hoover is shaken but unharmed. Local farmers swarm the crash site with pitchforks in hand. They order him to get out in Dutch, believing him to be German. He's captured by angry civilians and taken to a nearby town where a British Army supply truck happens to be passing by. He explains the situation. The British soldiers take him in. He's finally earned his freedom. Robert Anderson Hoover would survive the war and go on to gain fame as a stunt flyer, test pilot, and instructor. Jerome Ennis would also successfully escape. They reunited years later during one of Hoover's air shows where Ennis passed the time telling guests the story of their escape. For his part, Hoover was never proud of that flight. He later said, "It was about the dumbest thing I've ever done." Roughly a week after his escape, the last of the German guards fled Stalag Luft 1. It was properly liberated by the Red Army on May 1st. So Hoover very likely would have survived anyway. Still, he remains one of the very few to have the honor of stealing a Luftwaffe warplane. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross for the dogfight that led to his capture. He lived a long life and passed away in 2016, aged 94. But on that April day in 1945, Bob Hoover did something almost no prisoner of war has ever done. He looked at an enemy fighter plane sitting on abandoned concrete and thought, "That's my ride home." Bob Hoover stole a plane because he was a pilot. It's what he knew. But what do you do when you're not a fighter? When you're just a cook assigned to prepare meals while everyone else goes to battle? Our next hero didn't have wings or weapons or any kind of plan. He had a field kitchen, a pot of soup, and a firewood axe. And when a German tank rolled into his camp, he had exactly 3 seconds to decide, run or fight. He chose fight. It's July 2nd, 1941. A field kitchen sits in a forest near Duneburg, Latvia. Ivan Pavlovich Sereda calmly peels potatoes for the evening soup. He's a graduate from Culinary College, assigned to the 91st Tank Regiment, 46th Tank Division of the 21st Mechanized Corps as a cook. It's a grim scene at the camp. They've been fighting for 4 days straight. Losses are mounting. All around him are men in limbo. Tank crews with no tanks. Drivers without cars. Soldiers recovering from wounds. They clean weapons, do laundry, smoke, chat with each other. The only people with purpose are the mechanics running around fixing the many damaged tanks littered outside. Then suddenly, a liaison to the battalion commander arrives at the camp. He's shouting, ordering everyone, "Get your weapons and move out." A new German push threatens to encircle Allied forces. Every able-bodied man is desperately needed to plug holes in the front line. This ragged group of reserves included. All except him. As a cook, Sereda is ordered to stay in place, preparing meals as everyone else fights. If the front falls, he's to defend the camp to the death. He can do nothing but watch as the men around him drop everything and rush into battle. The camp is left alone, deathly quiet, a far cry from the scene just moments before. The eerie silence is broken only by the crackles of fire, the boiling water, and the distant echoes of battle. In the middle of the dead camp, Sereda still sits, preparing meals for the men fortunate enough to come back. A while later, a distant sound gets his attention. That distinctive rumble of engines, the squeak of tank suspension. More damaged tanks is less than Hayshown. Zero hash is greater than he leaves his work behind to take a look. Outside in a cloud of dust, he spots vehicles in the distance approaching his position. He considers lifting his hand to greet them. But something is wrong. The shape of the tanks is off. His blood runs cold as he realizes those aren't his comrades. They're German panzers. He stares at the scene for a few eternal, gut-wrenching moments, almost wishing his eyes are deceiving him. But they aren't. Sarita runs behind the kitchen tent. The soup is long forgotten. Peeking out from his hiding spot, he can see the tanks slowly approaching. But he also spots his rifle, resting abandoned against a sack of potatoes. He curses silently to himself and desperately searches around the back of the tent for a weapon. Any weapon. He quickly finds the axe they use to break firewood and takes it. It probably can't do much against a tank, but it will have to do. With the rumble of the tanks becoming ever louder, he takes another peek and watches as the German armour rolls by the camp. 2 Panzerkampfwagen 38s drive by, giving his kitchen little attention. But the third steers directly toward him. He hides. He needs to think fast if he's to come out of this alive. Hearing the tank come to a stop and looking back out, he sees the German tank parked right in front of his kitchen. The turret hatch swings open. The tank commander's head pops out. Is less than hay shown. 5 hash is greater than. The German appears to laugh and say things to his crew before nonchalantly jumping out of the machine and walking toward the seemingly abandoned kitchen. Sarita watches the commander, waiting for an opportunity, gathering his courage, gripping his axe. Then he strikes, charging out of his position, brandishing the axe high above his head, screaming like a madman. The German sees a sweaty, ragged figure with an apron and an axe charging toward him, and he runs for his life, fleeing right back to the safety of the tank. Sarita chases him down through the kitchen and picks up his rifle along the way. The commander climbs up and quickly disappears inside the vehicle, closing and locking the hatch behind him. Moments later, the tank's machine gun starts firing erratically, obviously unable to see Sarita. He dives out of the machine gun's arc of fire, sits in a blind spot as he assesses the situation. Then he spots a tarp lying on the floor. Thinking quickly, he grabs the tarp and throws it onto the tank's turret, blinding it. The tankers continue firing the machine gun despite being unable to see, ripping through the entire kitchen. Sarita takes another piece of cloth and throws it onto the co-driver's vision port. Then he runs around behind the tank, takes off his apron, and covers the driver's viewing port as well. The tank is now completely blind, yet they keep indiscriminately firing the machine gun. Fueled by adrenaline, Sarita jumps on the German war machine and smacks the barrel of the machine gun with the axe, repeatedly. The machine gun operator is confounded as the stock moves inside the tank in response to the pummeling from the axe. The German keeps firing, though. Whatever this Soviet monster is on the tank, it will be stopped by German lead, or so he thinks. As the barrel heats up through continuous fire, Sarita is unrelenting. Chop, chop goes the axe. Eventually, the heat of the barrel and the devastating blows from Ivan cause the barrel to bend. The machine gun is now useless. Sarita goes to work on the tank hull. Each swing of the axe reverberates inside the vehicle like a bell. he starts shouting fake orders to imaginary comrades. Get the grenades! Surround the tank! And giving answers in a different voice. The Germans inside are terrorized for their lives. They've rolled into a Soviet ambush, surrounded by dozens of men clamoring for revenge against the German invaders. In their minds, there's nothing more to do. Obviously vastly outnumbered, they choose to surrender. The hatch opens under the tarpaulin. Sereda waits, weapon at the ready. The commander in the turret opens the hatch. It's dark as the tarpaulin still covers the exit. He carefully climbs up, shouting out, "We surrender!" Slowly and deliberately, the commander removes the tarpaulin. When he finally escapes the clinging tarp, he looks around and takes in the scene. Where are the Soviet soldiers? Baffled by what he sees, a lone Soviet soldier standing on top of his tank, aiming a Mosin Nagant at his chest. Holding an axe. Wearing an apron. When the rest of the regiment returns from battle ready for soup, they're surprised. They don't see their cook by the campfire. Instead, they find him holding an entire tank crew prisoner and a working but somewhat battered German tank alongside. Sereda was assigned to scout duties after the events. He would join his comrades at the front line less than a week later. The axe he used during the engagement was kept as a memento of the 21st Mechanized Corps. Ivan Pavlovich Sereda proved to be an excellent soldier. He continued to defend his country for the rest of the war, being promoted several times and receiving many awards and commendations throughout. He would serve in the siege of Leningrad and in the Battle of Moscow as platoon commander. He was later promoted to senior lieutenant. As a man who single-handedly defeated a German tank with an axe, Ivan Sereda was awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union on August 31st, 1941. The citation doesn't mention whether the German tank crew ever lived down the humiliation. Captured by a cook, armed with kitchen implements. But here's what the story really tells us. When the Germans rolled into that camp, Sereda had three choices. Run into the forest, hide and hope they pass, or grab the nearest thing that could be used as a weapon and charge. He chose the third option. Not because he was fearless, not because he had a brilliant plan, but because someone had to defend that camp, and he was the only one there. Sometimes heroism isn't about training or preparation. Sometimes it's about a cook with an axe who refuses to surrender his kitchen. Ivan Sereda lived through the entire war. He returned home. He lived a quiet life. But on July 2nd, 1941, in a forest in Latvia, he proved something important. You don't need to be a soldier to fight like one. You just need to be the kind of person who won't run when the tanks come. Ivan Sereda fought with what he had, an axe, an apron, and sheer audacity. Our next hero would fight with even less. Desmond Doss was an American medic who refused to carry a weapon. Not because he couldn't, because his faith forbade it. His fellow soldiers thought he was crazy. Officers tried to get him discharged. But on a cliff in Okinawa called Hacksaw Ridge, Desmond Doss would prove that the greatest weapon isn't always a gun. Sometimes it's a rope, a prayer, and the refusal to leave anyone behind. It's April 1945 on the island of Okinawa. The 77th Division is bivouacked at the bottom of the Maida Escarpment, a 400-foot high cliff of boulders, rough terrain, and sheer vertical rock. The last 35 feet is a straight, vertical wall. In some places, there's even an overhang. Looking up at the hill, 26-year-old medic Desmond Doss sees the impossible challenge ahead. The 77th has been told to take the hill at any cost. Desmond, however, won't be firing a shot in the coming battle. A deeply religious man, Desmond joined the army with the firm conviction that thou shalt not kill. He's already been recommended for awards for extreme bravery under fire in both Guam and Leyte. In the war in the Pacific, being a medic makes you even more of a target than a regular soldier. Initially mistreated and ridiculed for his unwillingness to carry a weapon, Desmond has won the respect and admiration of his brothers in the field through his determination to save every wounded man, regardless of the personal danger it puts him in. The Japanese are dug in all over the hill with a network of caves and tunnels, some made up of 3 stories connected by ladders deep within the hill. Lieutenant Gaunto asks Doss and 2 other men to attach cargo nets and ladders to the vertical face. The 3 set out, under cover of darkness, climb the cliff and tie them securely to the coral rocks on the top edge of the Maida Escarpment. Returning, the lieutenant says, "Good job, fellows. It will sure help us get up and down a lot easier, and safer, I hope." In the morning of what was to become known as Miracle Day, the lieutenant addresses his men in Company B. "Those cargo nets are up, so we can get up on top more easily. Do your best, men." Desmond rushes over and says the men should really pray before they go up, intending the men to pray for themselves. Instead, the lieutenant says, "Gather round, men. Doss wants to pray for us." Desmond prays. Companies A and B start the assault of the Maida Escarpment. Reaching the top, Company A is immediately pinned down with many fallen. Company B is given the order to take the hill alone. Moving from pillbox to pillbox, they proceed to take out 9 pillboxes on that day and return back without a single man killed and only 1 injured. An incredible event given the circumstances. Headquarters is interested in how it was achieved. Company B sends back the message, "Doss prayed." The Signal Corps sends a photographer to take Doss's picture from the top of the escarpment. Over the days, the battle continues. The entrenched Japanese defend the hill, taking a toll on American forces. On May 5th, Captain Vernon approaches Doss. Doss is a Seventh-day Adventist, and in his religion, it's the Sabbath. The captain says, "Doss, would you mind going up on the escarpment today? You're the only medic we have left, and we really need you." Doss requests he can finish his reading. The captain replies, "We'll wait for you." When he's ready, the 155 remaining men in Company B set up the cliff. Things don't go to plan. Heaving satchel charges into Japanese positions. The enemy pulls out the fuses before the charges go off. The men then throw gasoline, followed by a grenade. At that point, a massive explosion occurs as a Japanese ammunition store deep within the hill goes off. Like angry hornets, the remaining Japanese defenders take this as a signal to redouble their efforts and swarm out of every position simultaneously. Firing upon the Americans, the US forces are cut down. The order to retreat is given as they're swept from the ridge. Tending to the wounded, Doss finds himself alone at the top as the last of his comrades who are able scramble down the nets. Doss tends to a wounded man. He's badly hurt. Desmond drags him to the edge of the cliff, finds a rope, ties him into a stretcher, and lowers the man to the ground. It takes some time and colossal effort. At the bottom of the cargo nets 35 feet below, Desmond shouts down, "Get him to the aid station pronto!" The soldiers do what they're told. Realizing the time it took and needing to find a quicker solution, he remembers the bowline knot. He grabs another injured man and forms a bowline, putting the man's legs between the loops and doubling the rope around the man's chest. He notices a blasted tree stump and winds the rope around it to give him leverage. Letting the next man down to the amazed soldiers below, Desmond knows what he has to do. Praying, "Lord, help me get one more," he goes to work. Dodging enemy fire, grabbing the injured, dragging them to the edge, lowering them down, and praying, "Lord, help me get one more." Dodging enemy fire, grabbing the injured, dragging them to the edge, lowering them down. "Lord, help me get one more." It takes him 5 hours. In total, he saves over 75 men on the escarpment that would become known as Hacksaw Ridge. When all the injured have been recovered, Doss climbs down, uninjured. 2 weeks later, Desmond is accompanying soldiers on a night mission into Japanese territory when he's hit by a grenade, damaging his leg. He and another soldier who's hit in the shoulder crawl to US territory and create a shallow hole to see out the night. After daybreak, the stretcher bearers come to pick up the wounded. Loading Desmond onto a stretcher, they set off for the aid station. While en route, they come across a man with a head injury. Doss knows the soldier should be priority. He makes the medics stop, rolls off the stretcher, and tells them to take the more heavily injured man. Doss tries to crawl and walk back with another injured soldier, a friend called Brooks. At that point, he's hit in the arm by an enemy sniper. Doss demands Brooks's rifle. Surprised, as Desmond has never touched a rifle before, Brooks hands it over. Forming a splint with the rifle, Doss patches up his arm and almost makes it to the medical station before passing out. He wakes up in hospital after doctors perform surgery, removing 17 pieces of shrapnel in the process. The military estimates that Doss saved more than 100 men on that incredible day on Hacksaw Ridge. Doss modestly says it couldn't have been more than 50. The Medal of Honor citation he receives for his action reads that he saved 75. October 12th, 1945. The White House lawn. President Truman presents the Medal of Honor during a ceremony. He shakes the hand of Corporal Desmond Doss and holds it the entire time his citation is read aloud. He says to Doss, "I'm proud of you. You really deserve this. I consider this a greater honor than being president. Here's what makes Desmond Doss's story different. Every other hero in this collection fought with something. A stolen plane, an axe, a gun. Desmond fought with nothing. He had a rope, a prayer, and a conviction that wouldn't break. While men around him fired thousands of rounds, Desmond saved lives one at a time. While others took the hill with bullets and grenades, he took it with endurance and faith. The Japanese threw everything at Hacksaw Ridge: artillery, machine guns, grenades, mortars, and one unarmed medic walked through it all 75 times. Not because he was invincible, but because every time he lowered a man down that cliff, he looked back up and saw another wounded soldier. And he couldn't leave. Lord, help me get one more. That's the prayer. Over and over. One more. Not 75 at once. Not a heroic rescue of a platoon in a single moment. One man is less than #0. 5 # is greater than then another. Then another. For 5 hours, Desmond Doss proved something that day on Hacksaw Ridge. The greatest act of courage isn't always killing the enemy. Sometimes it's refusing to let your brothers die. He lived until 2006, aged 87. And for the rest of his life, when people asked him how he did it, he always gave the same answer. I was praying the whole time. I just kept praying, Lord, please help me get one more. Desmond Doss climbed down a cliff alone after saving 75 men. Our next heroes would climb up beaches into hell itself. June 6th, 1944. D-Day. The largest amphibious invasion in history. 156,000 Allied troops storming fortified beaches across Normandy. At Gold Beach, a British sergeant named Stanley Hollis would charge German pillboxes with nothing but rage and a Sten gun. He would become the only British soldier awarded the Victoria Cross on D-Day. And he would earn it before breakfast. It's the early hours of June 6th, 1944. D-Day. The men of the Green Howards, one of Britain's oldest and proudest infantry regiments, are lining up on the Empire Lance, one of the mother ships traversing the English Channel. The Yorkshire-based unit has been selected by Field Marshal Montgomery as the spearhead of the landing on Gold Beach. As the Green Howards wait their turn to board the landing crafts, they're handed a last-minute piece of equipment. A condom. A booming voice thunders over the sound of cannon fire. What are these for? He bellows. Are we going to make war to the Germans or screw them? The voice belongs to Company Sergeant Major Stanley Elton Hollis, who may have used somewhat less polite vocabulary. The large and fiery man has fought with gallantry in all the major theatres of the war. From the Battle of France to El Alamein to the invasion of Sicily, he's said to have taken down at least 100 enemies. He's survived 5 major injuries. His men call him the man they couldn't kill. But he's about to live his most dangerous day yet. Hollis one of the old men of the unit at 31 years old, is looked up to by the younger soldiers who look to him to take the lead. Hollis and the Green Howards board their landing craft. They're heading to King's sector of Gold Beach, braving the violent waves and the defensive barrage discharged by German mortars and field guns. "Everything in the world opened up from behind us," he wrote in his brief memoirs. There were 25-pounders firing off floating platforms firing thousands of rockets in one salvo, cruisers, destroyers, battleships. Everything opened up on the shore. Some of the men are just tense. Most are shaking. All are struggling to look the day in the face and control their bodies. When Stan's craft is within reach of the shore, it's targeted with machine gun fire shot from a German pillbox on their flank. Pulling the cocking handle back on the landing craft's Lewis gun, Hollis unloads the whole ammo drum onto the German strongpoint. Stan pulls the machine gun off its mount to reload, but he forgets the barrel is red hot. With the scorching heat, he sears his hands. The ramp of the craft slams down. Stan jumps into waist-deep water. As the ground shakes under cannon and mortar shells, the sergeant leads his company up the heavily mined beach. The Green Howards are running up a hill toward the cover offered by a lone house. Suddenly, bursts of fire fall upon them, shot from another pillbox. A well-manned German MG-42 is a formidable foe. But so is this Yorkshire man with a Sten gun. In a moment of extreme courage, Sergeant Stanley Hollis stands up and runs zigzagging toward the enemies, managing to avoid the incoming German bullets. He reaches the enemy position, shoves the gun muzzle into the slit, squeezes the trigger. Then he climbs on top of the pillbox and throws a hand grenade inside. Stan waits for the explosion as smoke bellows out of the pillbox. He cracks the door open. All the Germans inside the fortification are wounded or too shocked to react. But Sergeant Stanley isn't going to stop here. After seeing another enemy battery parallel to the one he just destroyed, he fearlessly charges toward it, his mind set on catching another enemy bunker. Hollis manages to capture it and 20 German soldiers, all by himself. With 2 German batteries decommissioned, Hollis effectively secures an advance point for Allied troops who have already occupied a good part of the Normandy beaches. According to war biographer Mike Morgan, without Hollis's contribution, the first attack would have been stopped by the enemy troops, thus a crucial moment of the landing being jeopardized. Asked later why he risked his life so carelessly, Hollis simply replies, "Because I was a Green Howard." While storming another position, Stan throws yet another hand grenade. But he forgets to take out the pin first. Luckily for him, the 2 German soldiers don't realize it and keep their heads down. When they realize it's not going off, it's too late. Hollis drops them both. Nearby, several Germans manage to pull back to the south, but Stanley spots them and fires. There's a shot, and it's almost disastrous. Hollis's cheek is grazed by the bullet. Pushing past the shore, this fiery giant and his platoon are ordered to inspect a farmhouse in the village of Crepon. The only movement in the farmhouse is that of 2 dogs wagging their tails. But Hollis spots an enemy field gun in a nearby orchard. Hollis volunteers to take it out. He picks up a Piat launcher and orders 2 Bren gunners to follow him. The 3 men crawl as closely as possible to the objective. Stan loads the anti-tank weapon, takes aim, fires, but it falls short, and he gives away their position. The German gun barrel slowly cranks round toward Hollis and his men. The 3 keep their heads down as a cannon round sears through the air above them. Stanley withdraws and gives the order to withdraw. But his 2 mates can't move. They're pinned down by incoming German fire. Looking back, he realizes the 2 Bren gunners are still in the orchard. Hollis discards the Piat, grabs a Bren machine gun, and dashes back to help his men. He takes position by the fellow Howards and fires burst after burst toward the Germans. His suppressive fire silences the enemies long enough, allowing for the 2 Bren gunners to crawl to safety. Once they're out of range, Hollis turns back and sprints after them, chased by obstinate but imprecise Mauser bullets. Here's what makes Stanley Hollis different from most men. Most soldiers on D-Day were trying to survive, trying to get off the beach, trying to find cover. Stanley Hollis was trying to win. He didn't just charge 1 pillbox. He charged 2. He didn't just capture enemies. He went back into fire to save his men. He didn't throw 1 grenade. He threw several, including one that didn't even have the pin pulled. And when most men would have stayed in cover after nearly getting killed by a German field gun, Stanley Hollis ran back into the killing zone. Because 2 of his men were still there. On October 10th, 1944, at Buckingham Palace, King George VI pins the Victoria Cross on his chest. Wherever the fighting was the fiercest, Sergeant Hollis was there, says the official Victoria Cross report. Stan is the only British soldier to be awarded the VC on D-Day. But he would always downplay his achievements, claiming, "I've just been lucky. If I hadn't done the things I did, then somebody else would have." Stanley Hollis survived D-Day. He survived the entire Normandy campaign. He survived the push into Germany. He survived 5 major injuries throughout the war. His nickname, the man they couldn't kill, was well earned. But here's what the story doesn't tell you. Stanley Hollis wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to do his job. When he charged those pillboxes, he wasn't thinking about medals. He was thinking about the men behind him who couldn't advance until those guns were silenced. When he ran back to save those 2 Bren gunners, he wasn't thinking about glory. He was thinking about 2 soldiers pinned down who would die if someone didn't help them. Because I was a Green Howard. That's his entire explanation. Not because I was brave, not because I wanted a medal, but because I was a Green Howard. Because that's what Green Howards do. They lead. They fight. They don't leave men behind. Stanley Hollis returned to peacetime work after the war. He died in 1972, aged 59. The Green Howard's most famous son. But on June 6, 1944, while thousands of men struggled to survive on the beaches of Normandy, one sergeant from Yorkshire decided that survival wasn't enough. He charged the pillboxes. He captured the positions. He went back for his men. Not because he was fearless, but because someone had to. And Stanley Hollis was that someone. The man they couldn't kill didn't survive by hiding. He survived by being too busy saving everyone else to worry about himself. Stanley Hollis cleared Gold Beach before most men had gotten off the landing craft. 12 miles to the west, another beach was turning into a slaughter. Omaha Beach, the bloodiest landing of D-Day. Higher cliffs, stronger fortifications, more concentrated fire. First Lieutenant Jimmy Monteith of the 16th Infantry Regiment was about to perform 6 separate acts of extraordinary valor. He would guide tanks through minefields, silence machine gun nests, clear paths for his men. But he wouldn't survive to receive his medal. It's June 6th, 1944. D-Day. The landing craft sways back and forth in heavy waves. First Lieutenant Jimmy W. Monteith of the 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, hangs on for dear life. Ahead are the white sands of Omaha Beach, watched over by fortresses of concrete and steel. Explosions fill the air. The incessant pounding of artillery is just a taste of what they're going to face. The beach comes ever closer. Rain starts clattering against the steel of the craft. But it's no water. It's a rain of German lead. The men aboard are terrified. They clutch their rifles, facing down the barrel of what from here seems like an insurmountable foe. Monteith doesn't know it, but he's about to perform a feat that will compel the legendary generals Dwight D. Eisenhower and Omar Bradley to advocate him for the nation's highest honor. The craft comes to a stop. The moment they've dreaded has arrived. The doors fall. Monteith leads the charge off the boat. They fall into waist-deep water, desperately wading their way through as machine gun fire splashes all around them and strikes a few unfortunate souls. Monteith doesn't look back. He knows he can't. He reaches dry land and runs, shouting for his men to follow. Explosions rock the beach. Prearranged artillery strikes up and down the sands, tearing through the men. He runs at 200 yards of carnage, followed by over 100 men. He's lucky. He makes it unharmed. Ahead, they face a web of barbed wire, layered in plain view of deadly pillboxes. Monteith identifies the best spot to blow it open and orders a couple of his men armed with Bangalore mines to follow. They climb and crawl through the sand, hiding behind meagre cover of undergrowth and the barbed wire itself. Machine gun fire rips above their heads as they connect the tubes together and shove them through the barbed wire. They return to the embankment and detonate it, clearing a 9-foot gash into the wire. Monteith leaps out of cover, leading the charge through heavy fire. They run through the barbed wire and stop at the foot of their next massive hurdle. 2 minefields block their path. Fortunately, their proximity to the emplacements has made them harder to spot. The machine gun nests focus their fire on the poor souls, still disembarking and running through the sands. Not letting the relative safety go to waste, the soldiers prepare long stretches of Bangalore mines and slide them into the minefield. They lie down for cover, and the mine blows a path through. They run across, reaching the second minefield, and repeat the process. They're placing the mines when suddenly machine gun fire tears through the gathered men. They scatter for cover. The combat engineers hurriedly detonate the mines. Monteith runs through the minefield followed by some of his men. They huddle against the rocky embankment lining the beach, taking cover from this surprise pillbox overlooking their vector of attack. Monteith analyzes the situation. That pillbox must go, and fast. He looks back at the beach and spots 2 Sherman tanks in the sand. German machine gun tracers are ricocheting off their armor. Monteith tells his men to stay put, and fearlessly he charges out of cover, runs back across the beach amidst the hellfire. Running through the obstacles, racing through the killing fields, until he reaches the 2 Shermans. He takes cover beside them and bangs on the armor with his rifle. The commander inside cracks open the hatch and shouts, questioning what the hell he wants. Monteith tells him that a pillbox is keeping his advance pinned, and he needs the Shermans to follow him to take it out. The crew agrees, and he runs back up the beach. He takes cover on the embankment, waving at the tanks to follow. Guiding them through slowly but surely, he braves the air thick with German lead, signalling the machines by hand through the barbed wire and across the treacherous minefields. Finally, the pillbox comes into view. Monteith runs for the Shermans and shouts its position to the men inside before a volley of gunfire pings off their armor. He hastily takes cover behind the Shermans as they take aim and open fire. The pillbox is silenced with a brutal strike of 75mm shells of high explosive. Satisfied, Monteith and his men charge up the rocks and storm the German trench works. They find little resistance within, as the Germans are still focused on the beach. Using the trenches against the enemy, they burst into nearby bunkers and pillboxes and catch the crews by complete surprise. Germans in neighbouring sectors realise they have a breach and hastily rush to stop it. Monteith and his men take cover against the French hedgerows. Mobile machine gun crews take positions across the field ahead and to either side of Monteith. They're swiftly surrounded. The German commander shouts at them to surrender. Monteith ignores him. In response to their silence, the Germans open fire. The air is filled with the cracks of bullets flying overhead. But Monteith is unshaken. He decides the German machine guns across the field are the lesser threat, as the tall hedgerow, thick with rocks and roots, provides ample cover. The ones on their flanks are the biggest concern. He orders his men to stay put and cover him as he fits a rifle grenade to the end of his weapon's barrel. He leaps into action, and his men open fire behind him. Keeping along the hedgerow, he spots the muzzle flash of an MG-42 firing away amongst the greenery. He approaches undetected, aims his rifle, pulls the trigger. Monteith's aim is deadly. The position explodes in a cloud of dirt and shrapnel, forever silenced. He returns quietly triumphant and orders his men to repeat the strategy against the machine gun on the left flank. They open fire, and once again he leaps. But this time, it's to an open field. He's unfazed, charging with determination. He reaches a suitable firing spot, but he's lost track of the enemy. He fires where he thinks they are, but he's mistaken. He reloads behind cover. He waits for something to reveal their position, but they simply aren't firing. With astonishing bravery, he purposely draws their fire. The machine gun fires at him, riddling the dirt with bullets. Fortunately, the meagre cover proves sufficient, and now he's seen their position. He repositions himself and takes another shot. The melody of the German machine gun comes to an end with a bang. Monteith turns round and runs back to his men, braving the open field a second time. Here's what makes Jimmy Monteith's story different. He didn't perform one act of valor. He performed 6. He led his men off the beach under fire. He cleared barbed wire with Bangalore torpedoes while machine guns fired at him. He ran back across the beach, twice, to guide tanks through minefields. He silenced a pillbox that was pinning down his entire company. He stormed German trenches and caught defenders by surprise. And he eliminated 2 machine gun positions single-handedly, one while purposely drawing fire to find it. But on that final run back to his men, something happens. German machine gun fire erupts across the field. Monteith is hit. He falls in the green fields of France. The brave heart of Virginia is silenced. First Lieutenant Jimmy W. Monteith Jr., age 25. Killed in action, June 6, 1944. He now rests in the American cemetery in Normandy, a fallen hero among many. His cross is emblazoned with a golden star and the inscription, Medal of Honor. The medal would be delivered to his mother during a simple ceremony in her home. She placed it next to a picture of Jimmy she kept on her mantle. Here's what the citation says. Not that he was fearless, not that he was superhuman, but that he repeatedly exposed himself to enemy fire to accomplish his mission. That he led from the front when others might have led from behind. That he went back for tanks when he could have stayed in cover. That he drew enemy fire on himself to save his men. 6 separate times on Omaha Beach, Jimmy Monteith could have chosen safety. 6 separate times, he chose his men instead. Most officers on D-Day were trying to survive. Jimmy Monteith was trying to get his men off the beach alive. And he succeeded. The men he led made it off Omaha Beach. The pillboxes he silenced stopped firing. The paths he cleared allowed others to advance. His actions helped secure the beachhead at Omaha, the bloodiest and most contested landing of D-Day. Without officers like Jimmy Monteith, D-Day fails. It's that simple. Some heroes die earning their medals. Jimmy Monteith earned his 6 times over. Thousands of men stormed the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. But sometimes a city doesn't need an army. Sometimes it needs one angry man who refuses to quit. April 13th, 1945. The war in Europe is nearly over. The Netherlands. The city of Zwolle. 2 Canadian soldiers are sent to scout the city. One of them is named Leo Major. He's already lost an eye in combat. He's broken both ankles, his back, and several ribs. And he's about to liberate an entire city by himself. It's the night of April 13th, 1945, in Zwolle, in the Netherlands. Canadian soldiers from the Régiment de la Chaudière cautiously approach the city under cover of darkness. Crouching low beside the road, the commanding officer asks for 2 volunteers. For those who dare to step forward, the mission will be one of stealth and courage, not force or fight. Or so everyone thinks. Despite reports of significant enemy forces in the area, they'll need to enter the city undetected, scout targets, and relay the information back to artillery batteries, gearing up for the impending barrage. If possible, make contact with Dutch partisans. In the quiet still of the night, 24-year-old, bad-tempered French-Canadian private Leo Major and his friend Corporal Willie Arsenault share a quick glance. Then nodding, the 2 men accept the challenge and throw themselves to their fate. Major has already suffered many injuries from previous battles, including a broken back, the loss of one eye, broken ribs, and both ankles broken. Unwilling to be sent home, though, he argued that if he had just one eye to look into the scope, he was still capable of serving his country. "I was a sniper," he later said. "I still had one good eye, and I could still shoot." Now weighed down with Sten guns and grenades, the pair scurries into the shadows toward the central square. It's a beautiful old city. Oddly, considering the circumstances, Major regrets that in just a few hours, it and many of its citizens will be reduced to rubble and ash. Arsenault agrees. And the daring Canadians hatch an amazing plan that may just save this historic city and its residents. The army of 2 will capture it single-handedly. Making their way through the city, they occasionally see German soldiers and officers. But they're harried and preoccupied. Some stumble like they're drunk. The 2 men remain undetected. But as midnight approaches, Arsenault makes a fatal blunder, giving away their position. Germans nearby open fire. The 2 men take cover from the incoming fire and muzzle flashes. Major turns to his friend to figure out the way out of this mess. But with horror, he realizes that Arsenault's body is limp. He's been fatally hit. That horror soon turns to sadness, then rage. Leo, mad with anger at the loss, struggles to restrain his infamous temper. What happens next is extraordinary. Instead of beating a retreat, he decides to continue the plan alone. He continues to the center of Zwolle, arriving at about 1 o'clock in the morning. The city streets are deserted. But spotting a German machine gun nest, he goes on the attack once more, storming it and eliminating the gun crew. Continuing on his rampage through the streets, he shoots at every target he can until he sees the headquarters of the SS. It's a juicy target. Bursting through the door, he's confronted by 8 elite soldiers. Major later said, "They pulled a gun on me, but with one eye, I can see better than most people at night." I killed 4 of them. The other 4 ran away. Walking on, he loses track of time and finds himself on the outskirts. Just a few yards away, he sees a young soldier behind the wheel of a German staff car parked outside a tavern. Major jumps the young man and takes him captive without firing a shot. Shoving the young soldier through the tavern door, he calmly disarms a tipsy officer drinking alone at the bar. Major assures him that the war will soon be over and that all of hell is coming, and that Major is part of a large Allied force advancing on Zwolle. Cleverly leaving out the part about being alone, he adds that the lovely city is about to be subjected to an epic bombardment. Not particularly keen on losing his life for a lost cause, the officer finishes his drink and says he's leaving, and takes his men with him. The larger force is already long gone. Out of respect, Major returns the man's sidearm, and the 2 part company. To confirm the officer's claims, Leo Major orders his young captive to drive him through the streets while he shoots wildly and tosses grenades at targets of opportunity. Though his rampage does little damage, he's hell-bent on making a memorable commotion. Then, unable to find any more targets, he sets his captive free. With his rage finally spent, the man walks dazed through the deserted streets for hours. Near collapse, he meets a wary Dutch farmer who takes him to the head of local resistance. Major and the rest of the resistance men return to the square to alert residents that the city has been liberated. With just one thing left to do, Major and his new companions commandeer a car and return to collect the body of Arsenal. Sure that the killing and chaos are finally behind them, as the sun rises they carelessly drive toward the Canadian Chaudières, who fire on them, suspecting they're Germans. Furious and exasperated, Major climbs on top of the car. When his bewildered compatriots recognize him, they lay down their arms. Leo Major reports that the city is nearly free of Germans. With that good news, the artillery bombardment is cooled off. The city and its citizens are spared, down to Leo Major's actions. For his heroic, if unsanctioned deeds, Major receives the Distinguished Conduct Medal. But ever the rebel, he declines the decoration because he considers General Bernard Montgomery incompetent and in no way worthy of bestowing it upon him. Although many of Major's exploits that night may have been embellished, it seems he killed more than a dozen Germans in multiple engagements. Here's what makes Leo Major's story so remarkable. He wasn't ordered to liberate Zwolle. He was ordered to scout it. He wasn't part of an assault force. He was part of a 2-man reconnaissance team. And when his partner was killed, he didn't retreat. He got angry. Most soldiers would have pulled back, reported the contact, waited for reinforcements. Leo Major decided to finish the job himself. He stormed machine gun nests, killed SS officers, bluffed entire garrisons, drove through streets shooting and throwing grenades. Not because he had a plan, but because he was furious. And because a beautiful city was about to be destroyed by artillery, and he thought maybe he could prevent that. The Germans in Zwolle that night didn't know they were facing one man. They heard gunfire from multiple positions. Explosions across the city. Shouting in the streets. They thought they were facing a coordinated assault. So they did what any rational force would do when outnumbered and surrounded. They withdrew. And by the time the sun came up, Zwolle was free. Not because of a grand battle, but because one angry, half-blind Canadian refused to let his friend die for nothing. Leo Major's story doesn't end at Zwolle. In Korea, he and 18 men held a hill against 14,000 Chinese soldiers. He won a second Distinguished Conduct Medal, one of only 3 people in history to receive the award twice. He lived until 2008, aged 87. The Dutch never forgot him. A street in Zwolle bears his name. A monument was erected in his honour. He was treated as a hero in the Netherlands until the day he died. But when asked about that night in Zwolle, he always downplayed it. "I was just doing my job," he would say. Except his job was to scout. Not to kill a dozen Germans. Not to bluff officers in taverns. Not to terrorize an entire garrison into fleeing. That wasn't his job. That was Leo Major being Leo Major. Angry, stubborn, half-blind, and absolutely unstoppable. Sometimes liberation doesn't need an army. Sometimes it needs one very angry Canadian who refuses to accept that the mission is over just because his partner is dead. Leo Major looked at an occupied city and thought, "I can take this by myself." And then he did. Leo Major liberated a Dutch city alone through chaos and bluffing. Our next hero fought a very different kind of war. While Major was storming through streets, in Soviet skies a young woman was hunting German aces. She was 21 years old. She bleached her hair blonde. She painted flowers on her cockpit. And she terrified the Luftwaffe. They called her the White Lily of Stalingrad. On August 1st, 1943, she took off on a mission and never came back. Her fate remains one of World War II's greatest mysteries. September 13th, 1942. The bitter Battle of Stalingrad is in the early stages. High above in the skies are 4 Yak-1 fighters from the 437th Fighter Regiment. They're on a mission to cover and defend the beleaguered city. In command is Major Stepan Danilov, a combat-experienced pilot. But in his charge today is a young pilot who, at the age of 21, has shown great promise but has yet to score a victory. Danilov plans to keep his eye on his young charge in the plane with number 32 on the fuselage. In the distance, a formation of Junkers 88s is spotted. And they're not alone, being escorted by Messerschmitt Bf 109s. The 4 Yaks increase speed and spring into action. Rapidly approaching the Germans, the 4 Soviet pilots pick their targets. The Yak-1 is a fast, maneuverable plane that's deadly in the hands of a capable pilot. But it's lightly armed and needs a high degree of skill and accurate marksmanship in order to take down an enemy. The melee ensues. The Bf 109s from JG 53 break formation to engage the Soviets. The battle is on. But Danilov needn't have worried. Number 32 lines up the target and watches it loom larger and larger in the sights. The Junkers 88 is at last within range. Number 32 unleashes a hail of machine gun fire. It's on target. Bullets rake the Junkers until it bursts into flames and starts falling in an arc toward the ground. It's the first kill for the young pilot. But that's not the end for number 32 on this fateful day. The 437th is a mixed squadron with men and women pilots. Commander Raisa Believa, also in a Yak-1, is in trouble. A Bf-109 is all over her tail. Raisa pulls hard into a turn, desperately trying to shake off the German pilot. But it's no good. The 109 is on her like glue. In the pilot's seat of the 109 is German ace Staff Sergeant Erwin Meyer, with 11 confirmed victories. Number 32 spots that the commander is in trouble and comes to the rescue. With expert flying, 32 manages to get behind Meyer. Experienced as he is, Meyer spots the threat and knows he's in trouble. He reluctantly breaks off from his intended kill. Number 32 is having none of it though, and deftly lets loose a burst of fire, perfectly timed. It's a critical hit. The Bf-109 pours smoke and oil. Meyer knows there's no way to get his bird down in one piece. He opens the hatch and jumps out of his stricken warbird. The parachute opens. He sees his nemesis, the Yak-1, with 32 painted on the side, zoom past him as he drifts slowly into enemy territory. The Red Army conducts a search and captures the German. Marching him back to base, Meyer inquires if he could meet the pilot that bested him in the air. Number 32. The Soviets agree. After landing, the pilot of number 32 is summoned for a meeting with their vanquished foe. However, when the pilot enters the room, Meyer is dumbstruck. He's told that this is the pilot who shot him down, who also happens to be a young, attractive woman. Lydia Litviak. Meyer curses the Soviets for humiliating him with this joke in poor taste. But Lydia steps forward. In a clear voice and with obvious disdain for the invader, she explains step by step how she bested the German ace with 11 victories to his name. Meyer, realizing he's face to face with the pilot who vanquished him, apologizes. He takes off his gold watch and offers it to the young woman. Fixing the German with her piercing blue eyes, she responds, "I don't accept gifts from my enemies." She turns on her heels and leaves the German to contemplate his fate. She makes history on that day by becoming the first woman pilot to shoot down an enemy aircraft. But this is just the start. The next day, she engages in an aerial battle against another Bf-109, this time piloted by Lieutenant Hans Fuss, who has 71 victories to his name. Litviak manages to put a hole in his fuel tank. Fuss disengages from the melee and speeds for home, but he runs out of fuel on his return. The 109 goes down, somersaulting on the ground before reaching base. Lydia's fame grows. Her commanding officer says of her, she was very aggressive, a born fighter pilot. With her striking looks and fame in defending Stalingrad, she's given the name the White Lily of Stalingrad, by her comrades. In February 1943, she's promoted to junior lieutenant and chosen to join a group of elite pilots that are permitted to search for targets under their own initiative. These free hunters are made up of only the most experienced pilots. In recognition of this status, she has a white lily painted on the side of her plane. In March 1943, Lydia is flying as one of 6 Yak fighters. Spotting 12 Junkers 88s, the Yaks engage the group. Litviak, ignoring the escorting 109s, lines up a Junkers 88 in her sights and takes the plane down. But before she can get clear, a 109 has her in its sights. Raking the cockpit of Lydia's Yak 1, the White Lily is hit. A bullet tears through the cockpit. Her foot is shattered. Severe pain and blood loss. Shrugging off the pain as best she can, she manages not only to keep control of her plane, but engages and shoots down another Bf 109, piloted by Lieutenant Franz Müller. Despite being in severe pain and losing blood, she manages to return to the airfield. But injury wouldn't stop Litviak. She's back in the pilot seat by May. Being in war and in a frontline position, her environment is very male-dominated. But Lydia continues to embrace her femininity and her rebellious nature. She bleaches her hair blonde when regulations forbid it. She wears a scarf instead of a regulation collar. She paints flowers on her cockpit. The Luftwaffe learns to fear the Yak with the White Lily. Soviet propaganda celebrates her. Her fellow pilots respect her. The Germans know her reputation. By the summer of 1943, Lydia Litviak has 12 confirmed solo kills and several shared victories. She's one of the deadliest fighter pilots in the Soviet Air Force. And she's 21 years old. August 1st, 1943. Just a few days before her 22nd birthday, Lydia takes off from her base at Krasny Luch. While on a mission with pilot Ivan Borisenko, she engages a group of German bombers. She doesn't see 2 Bf 109s that are protecting the bombers. One of them, piloted by Knight's Cross holder Hans-Jörg Merkel, intercepts the White Lily of Stalingrad. She's struck. The planes disappear behind a cloud, out of Borisenko's view. According to German reports, the injured Soviet plane turned and rammed into the Bf 109, killing its pilot. Borisenko descends and searches for Lydia, but he finds no trace of her. The Soviets rarely, if ever, award the hero of the Soviet Union to those that are captured by the enemy. As time passes and the crash site isn't found, doubt lingers that Lydia has been taken prisoner by the Germans. Her friend Ina Pasportnikova takes it upon herself to prove that Lydia has not been captured. It takes her 36 years with metal detectors and help from Lydia's family. Eventually, in 1979, after finding more than 90 other crash sites, Pasportnikova is told that a woman pilot has been buried in Dmitrievka after receiving a head wound. The remains are exhumed. A special commission concludes that this is the remains of the White Lily of Stalingrad. In 1990, 47 years after her plane has been downed, Lydia Litviak is awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union by President Gorbachev. But that's not the end of this story. Many historians today believe Lydia may have survived. In the year 2000, Nina Raspopova, a veteran of the famous Night Witches bomber regiment who knew Lydia, is watching a television broadcast from Switzerland. On that TV show, it features a former Soviet woman fighter pilot who has been wounded twice, left the Soviet Union, got married, and had 3 children. Raspopova, in shock, looks at this old woman on the grainy TV image. Could it be Lydia? Unfortunately, we'll never know. No further information was found on this mysterious Soviet veteran. Pasportnikova, when reminiscing of Lydia, said she never believed that she was invincible. She believed that some pilots had luck on their side and others didn't. She firmly believed that if you survived the first missions, the more you flew and the more experience you got, your chances of making it would increase. But you had to have luck on your side. Here's what we know for certain. Lydia Litviak was the first woman in history to shoot down an enemy aircraft in combat. She was one of only 2 female fighter aces in history. She fought while wounded. She refused to conform. She terrified the Luftwaffe. And on August 1st, 1943, she disappeared into the sky and never came back. Whether she died that day at 21 or lived a quiet life in Switzerland into old age, we may never know. But the White Lily of Stalingrad proved something important. Courage has no gender. The sky doesn't care if you're a man or a woman. It only cares if you can fly. And Lydia Litviak could fly. Lydia Litviak fought prejudice and the Luftwaffe at the same time. Our final hero faced his own 2 wars. November 1944, France. The 761st Tank Battalion is about to face serious action. They're composed entirely of black American soldiers and NCOs commanded by white officers. Some army commanders expect them to flee at the first engagement. Sergeant Warren Cressy is about to prove them spectacularly wrong. He'll lose 2 tanks in one day, watch his best friend die, and earn a nickname that will last forever. The Iron Man. November 10th, 1944. Near Morville, Les Vic, Normandy. The 761st Tank Battalion of the US Army is about to face serious action against a reinforced German division. The 761st has had to fight prejudice before they even engage the Germans. They're composed entirely of black American soldiers and NCOs, commanded by white officers. Some army commanders expect them to flee at the first engagement. The 761st is about to prove their worth. One of the M5 Stuart tanks of Company D is commanded by 21-year-old Sergeant Warren Gamaliel Harding Creasy, or simply Harding to his friends. This Texan sergeant may appear an unlikely soldier to onlookers. He's easygoing, polite, even meek. But he's also known as one of the most gung-ho, hardcore recruits since his training days at Camp Hood. As Harding stands on top of his M5, Scanning the surrounding area while manning the vehicle's 50 caliber machine gun, the silence is broken by a barrage of fire that comes raining all around him. Harding and his crew are unharmed, but a direct hit has knocked out the tank. The unit's patch represents a Black Panther, not a sitting duck. Before the Germans can attack again, Creasy dismounts the Stuart and commandeers a 30 caliber machine gun from a nearby jeep. Running toward the enemy positions, Sergeant Creasy opens fire, mowing down the crew of an anti-tank gun. He then turns his attention to a nearby machine gun nest. It's a duel of Browning versus Mauser, M1919 versus MG42. And the lone Texan gunner comes out on top. With all immediate threats wiped out, Harding and his crew commandeer another M5 and get on with the fight. Later, when a lieutenant from another division flags them down, he needs to inspect a hill and could do with a lift. The narrow treads can barely grip the snowy terrain, but the tank manages to crawl up the slope. Just as they approach the summit, there's a burst of fire. Then another as the armour is blasted with machine gun bullets. Creasy orders his driver, Corporal Tyree, to back up. Ty kicks the machine into reverse, but the tank falls into an anti-tank ditch. Standing at an angle, the soft underbelly of the M5 is exposed to anti-tank weapons. As Tyree rocks the machine back and forth, the German machine gunners continue spraying their storm of lead. Creasy, calm under fire, immediately radios for help. Another tank soon arrives to tow them out of the ditch. But who is going to brave the hail to connect the two tanks? Creasy flatly announces to his crew, "I'm going out to hook us up." Tyree replies, "Christ, Sarge." Creasy calmly adjusts his horn-rimmed glasses and answers, "Keep that thought." The sergeant then jumps out of the Stuart wielding his Thompson 45 submachine gun. He empties an entire magazine toward the enemy to keep their heads low, then hooks up a cable between the two tanks. Ignoring the German bullets whizzing past, he waits for the second tank to pull his M5 out of the ditch, unhooks the cable, then jumps back inside. As his crew looks at him in disbelief, Creasy offers his views on the German gunner. That boy can't shoot shit. His sergeant ought to ship him back for retraining. But that boy must have a big brother in artillery somewhere. An armour-piercing shell rams right into the side of the Stuart. The suspension is damaged. One track is completely lost. Harding has had 2 tanks shot from under him in the same day. In the turret, Creasy grips the triggers of the 50 caliber heavy machine gun. He soon realizes that the German MG42s are now shooting at exposed infantry units. Harding redirects his fire toward the enemy nests, silencing their positions for good. The action is now over. Sergeant Creasy can lead his crew back to the rear to regroup. But there is no respite from bad news. His best friend, Technician 4th Grade Horatio Scott, with Company C, has been severely wounded. Their friendship goes all the way back to Camp Hood. They've been inseparable since. Scotty has a message delivered to Harding. "It's okay, man. I'll be back soon." The morning after, Harding learns that Horatio died during the night while undergoing surgery. Cressy immediately requests a transfer to Company C to take the place of his fallen companion. Continuing the fight with Company C, Warren G. Harding Creasy earns the nickname of Iron Man and has a reputation as the baddest man in the 761st. Facing again direct fire from machine gun nests, he's described as going berserk. Creasy attacks the enemy positions single-handedly, spending every single round until his unit has to pry the empty machine gun from his hands. The 761st Battalion, the Black Panthers, distinguishes themselves by fighting continuously for 183 days until the 6th of May, 1945. Their Iron Man Creasy is nominated for a Medal of Honor but is awarded the Silver Star instead. He's in the forefront of every attack during the 761st's 183 days of constant combat. The more fire he draws upon himself, the harder he fights. Here's what makes Warren Creasy's story different from all the others. Every hero in this collection had to fight the enemy. Warren Creasy had to fight two enemies. The Germans were shooting at him, but his own army didn't believe in him. The 761st Tank Battalion was sent into combat with low expectations. Some commanders believed they would break and run at the first sign of trouble. Some thought they couldn't handle the pressure of armoured warfare. Some questioned whether black soldiers had the courage to fight. The 761st answered with 183 days of continuous combat. They fought through France, through Germany, through some of the fiercest resistance of the war. They lost men. They lost tanks. They kept fighting. And Warren Creasy became the symbol of everything they represented. When his first tank was knocked out, he didn't retreat. He grabbed a machine gun and charged the enemy. When his second tank fell into a ditch under fire, he didn't stay inside. He jumped out and hooked the cable himself. When his second tank was destroyed, he didn't seek safety. He manned the .50 caliber and kept firing. When his best friend died, he didn't break. He transferred to his friend's unit and fought harder. The more impossible the situation, the more determined he became. Not because he was trying to prove something to the doubters, but because his brothers were depending on him. And Warren Creasy didn't leave brothers behind. The 761st Tank Battalion was finally recognized decades later. They received a Presidential Unit Citation in 1978. Their combat record helped pave the way for military integration. In 1948, President Truman desegregated the armed forces. The Black Panthers proved something that should never have needed proving. That courage doesn't see colour. That a soldier's worth isn't determined by skin, but by what he does when the bullets start flying. Warren Creasy fought two wars. One against the enemy. One for respect. He won both. Sergeant Warren Creasy survived the war. He returned home to Texas. He lived a quiet life. He died in 2005. But on November 10th, 1944, and for 183 days after Warren Creasy proved what the Iron Man nickname really meant, it wasn't about the tanks he fought in. It was about a will that wouldn't break. 2 tanks shot from under him in one day, kept fighting. Best friend killed, kept fighting. Surrounded by fire, kept fighting. Facing prejudice from his own side, kept fighting. Because that's what the Black Panthers did. They didn't just fight to win the war. They fought to prove they belonged on the battlefield. And Warren Cressy, the easygoing, polite Texan with horn-rimmed glasses, became the embodiment of their struggle. He drew fire like a magnet, and he fired back twice as hard. The army expected the 761st to fail. Instead, they fought longer and harder than almost any unit in the European theatre. They called him Iron Man, not because he was invincible, but because when everything else broke, the tanks, the plans, the expectations, Warren Cressy didn't. He just kept fighting. 8 heroes. 8 impossible moments. Bob Hoover stole an enemy plane from behind enemy lines. Ivan Sereda defeated a tank with an axe. Desmond Doss saved 75 without firing a shot. Stanley Hollis charged pillboxes on D-Day. Jimmy Monteith gave everything on Omaha Beach. Leo Major liberated a city alone. Lydia Litviak became a ghost in the sky. Warren Cressy proved courage has no colour. These people weren't superheroes. They were cooks and medics and soldiers. They were scared, exhausted, watching friends die. But they refused to quit. Not because they were fearless, but because someone had to keep going. 80 years later, we tell their stories. Not to glorify war, but to remember what human beings are capable of when everything is on the line. When heroes defied the odds, they didn't do it for glory. They did it because someone had to. And they did.